Cupertino Senior TV Productions is pleased to present a discussion of the June 2012 ballot propositions by the League of Women Voters of Cupertino-Sunnyvale.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Hello, and welcome to The Better Part. I'm Susan Huff from the League of Women Voters of Cupertino-Sunnyvale, and I'm here with Michael Lusk to give you a little information about the upcoming election on June 5th. Now, we're not going to be talking about the candidates. We're going to be talking about those ballot measures, those ones that you're probably wrestling with, trying to decide who to believe and how the costs and benefits weigh out. The hope is, by the end of this program, you'll have a little better idea about the issues and the trade-offs. So let's start, Michael, with the election calendar. What's the deadline for registering to vote in this election?
To vote on Tuesday, June 5th, you must be registered by Monday, May 21st. The registration deadline is always 15 days before an election, and you need to re-register if you've moved or you want to change parties. You can find registration forms at any post office or DMV, at your library, or from your local League of Women Voters. Here in Santa Clara County, you can download them from the Registrar of Voters website at www.sccvote.org. That's SCC as in Santa Clara County, vote as in what you want to do, .org. Complete the form and mail it in or bring it into the Registrar of Voters office.
Now, I know more and more people are voting by mail these days, so if I'm one of those vote by mail folks, when do I need to mail my ballot to make sure that my vote gets counted?
If you're not a permanent vote by mail voter, you have until May 29th to request a vote by mail ballot, but I wouldn't wait that long. Your ballot must be received by the Registrar of Voters by the time the polls close on Election Day. So you should probably mail your ballot several days in advance, say by Friday before the election. However, you can also drop your ballot off at any polling place in your county on Election Day. If you send your ballot over with someone else, make sure you write that person's name in the space provided on the ballot envelope, or the poll workers won't be able to accept it.
Okay, that takes care of the logistics of voting. What else do people need to know?
Well, I think people might like to know who we are and why we do this. So before getting into the propositions, I want to remind our audience where we come from and what we're trying to accomplish today. The League of Women Voters is actually two organizations, a nationwide member organization of women and, as you can see, men, and an education fund. Neither organization supports or opposes political parties or candidates, ever. But the member organization does take positions on public policy issues. Members vote to study an issue, they collect information and discuss it, and come to a consensus on a position. Then, when new laws are proposed, the League can compare those proposed laws with positions already established by the members and decide to support, oppose, or remain neutral on them. The member organization may have taken positions on some of the propositions we will be discussing today. Although Susan and I are League members, we are not here to advocate on behalf of the League of Women Voters or to lend support to its positions. Instead, we are here as a service of the League of Women Voters Education Fund. We are here to give an unbiased explanation of the propositions, including the pros and cons. Our purpose today is to inform voters, not to influence people to vote one way or the other. The powerful thing about initiatives and referendums is that we, the voters, are directly responsible for some of the laws that shape the society we're in. That should feel like a big responsibility. What kind of society do we want to live in? How do you want your tax money spent? What are your priorities? If you make a serious effort to understand the likely effect of the measures you're voting on, your vote can reflect your principles. That's our passion here at the Education Fund element of the League of Women Voters. We want voters who are thinking about their choices when they mark their ballots. Now, on to the election. What do we have this time around, Susan?
I know we advertised this show as being only about the state ballot measures, but with only 2 of those, we do have some time to briefly mention the local Santa Clara County measures. I don't think we'll be able to do this in the fall show. That November ballot is already filling up with qualified ballot measures, but we'll take this opportunity since we have it. At the top of the ballot, the County of Santa Clara is asking whether the Board of Supervisors should have the discretion to determine who operates the jails. Now, this is a response to a 2010 decision by the Board of Supervisors to take most of the job of running the jails away from the Department of Correction and place it under the Sheriff's Office. The board was promptly sued by people who claimed that 1988's Measure A spelled out how the jails were run, and since that was established by a vote of the people, it should take a vote of the people to change anything like that. Both sides now appear to hope that putting the issue to a public vote now will settle things. Over in the city of San Jose, residents will have the chance to vote on some changes to the pension plans for city employees and retirees. Now, this has been an issue of really intense disagreement between the city and the unions. I can only suggest that you read the full text of the proposed measure, don't settle for anybody's soundbite, and really weigh your priorities carefully here. There is currently a lawsuit on the ballot language. That's that brief description of the measure. That's all a lot of people ever read. Unions claim that the current ballot language was written by the city attorney in a manner that, rather than being neutral, which is required by election law, is actually advocating for the city's point of view. I do expect that the Santa Clara County Superior Court will rule quickly on that language, so everything is going to be firmed up well before Election Day. We also have 4 school bond measures around the county. West Valley Mission Community College District has a $350 million bond proposal. Milpitas Unified School District would like to raise $95 million. Mountain View Huisman School District is looking for $198 million in bond funding, and Cupertino Union School District has put a $220 million bond on. All of these are for facilities upgrades and repairs in technology. All of them need 55% voter approval to pass. Depending on where you live, you might see a wide variety of local measures on the ballot. Just remember that parcel taxes require 2/3 of the votes cast to be in favor in order to pass, but most school bond measures can be written to require only a 55% supermajority. And of course, measures that don't deal with raising money, you're looking at a simple majority. But going to the state ballot, let's first note, this is the first election with the new districts drawn up by the Citizens Redistricting Commission. There have been a bunch of court challenges, but both state and federal court rulings have supported the commission's boundaries. There is a referendum coming on the state Senate maps. The State Secretary of State's office has verified backers have collected enough valid signatures to force a referendum. But even with the referendum on the November ballot, the California Supreme Court has ruled that it's the commission's maps that will be used for this year's elections. But things are definitely different. You may not see any incumbent on your ballot. You might see a name that you don't recognize. You might see multiple incumbents. And just to add to the excitement for the candidates, this is our first time using top 2 primary, isn't it?
Yes, in fact, let's review that one a bit. In June 2010, voters approved Proposition 14, the Top 2 Primary Act. And as a result of that act, we now have 2 types of elections on the November ballot. Most offices are now what we are calling voter-denominated. That means that on this June ballot, all candidates will be listed and will vote for the one person we want. The top 2 vote-getters advance to the November ballot, regardless of their party, and even if one candidate gets more than 50% of the votes in June. Candidates can choose to have their party preference listed or not. The parties can choose to endorse candidates, and the sample ballots will show the endorsement list.
So I heard you say most offices. Can you be more specific? Which races are under the top 2 primary system now?
State Senate, State Assembly, U.S. House of Representatives, Board of Equalization, Governor, Attorney General, but it's actually easier to say which ones aren't in the top 2 system. Candidates for president and the county central committees of the political parties are still party nominated, and local elections haven't changed at all. For those, it'll be just like before.
Remind us all what just like before is.
Well, party central committees are, of course, inherently party organizations, so they're chosen by members of the political parties. And local elections have too many variations for us to cover, with district seats, at-large seats, vote for one, vote for no more than 3, whatever suits a particular area. But the presidential primary is the one that attracts the most interest. Here in California, presidential primaries can be closed or not, as the party chooses. If the party chooses a closed primary, then only voters who have declared that party preference participate in choosing that party's nominee. You'll get a ballot with only the candidates who share your party preference. But some parties choose to have a modified closed presidential primary and will allow people who have not stated a party preference to vote. Note that this is not an open primary. People who have a stated preference for a different party are still not allowed to help pick the party's candidate. But what we used to call declined to state voters, and now call no party preference voters, can have a say. In this election, the Democratic and American independent parties have opted for a modified closed primary, while the rest are closed.
Is that all the news about the top 2 primaries?
Yes, except for the write-in candidates. In the old system, write-in candidates showed up in the general election. They hadn't won a party primary, but still wanted to run, so they mounted their challenges in November. In the new system, because the June election puts everyone in the contest together, no write-in candidates are allowed in the general election. Because it limits voter choice, this provision is the subject of one of the court challenges to the top 2 primary. But the courts haven't ruled yet, and this is the system we're using this time around. But all this, and we haven't looked at the state ballot measures yet. What do we have?
Let's start with Proposition 28. That one's on term limits.
Haven't we seen term limit propositions before? In fact, didn't we pass at least one?
Yes. Current term limits were set by Proposition 140 in 1990. That one passed with 52% of the vote. Those limits allow a total of 14 years in office, with a maximum of 6 years in the Assembly and a maximum of 8 years in the State Senate. And the current limits don't count partial terms. Now, over the years, there have been various attempts to adjust term limits, either tightening them up, weakening them, abolishing them completely, every variation. This year's version is Proposition 28. So if Proposition 28 passes, the limit will be 12 years total in either or both houses. So someone who serves in only one house might serve longer under the terms of Proposition 28. But what we won't see is someone getting termed out in the Assembly and then deciding to run for the Senate instead. Anyone who's already in office or anyone who is elected in this June election would still be bound by the old rules.
And what effect is this likely to have?
We don't have completely up-to-date information, but we can take advantage of the fact that Proposition 28 is virtually identical to Proposition 93 from 2008. That one didn't pass, but they did a lot of research and we can borrow it. So as of 2007, an Assembly member had a median of 4 years of legislative experience. Half of the Assembly members had more, half the Assembly members had less. While the median total experience for a state senator was between 8 and 10 years, about 6 of those in the state Senate. And at that time, the Center for Governmental Studies predicted that if that version of the measure passed, median service in the Assembly would probably go up by about 4 years to about 8 years, while median time in the Senate would also go up by about 4 years to 10 years or so. Now, who do we see liking Proposition 28, and what do they have to say?
Signing arguments in favor, we have the League of Women Voters of California, California Common Cause, the Congress of California Seniors, and a former chair of the Fair Political Practices Commission. They say that by having separate term limits for Senate and Assembly, the current system encourages legislators to jump from office to office instead of settling in to learn their jobs. They also say that currently inexperienced legislators are not well prepared for the challenges our state faces. And on the other hand, those who game the system can get 17 years in office, counting partial terms, versus Proposition 28's firm 12-year limit.
And what about those against 28? Who are they, and what do they have to say?
Signing arguments against are People's Advocate Incorporated, Californians for Term Limits, Americans for Prosperity, U.S. Term Limits, Parents in Charge Foundation, and the National Tax Limitation Committee. They say Proposition 28 is a scam that pretends to fix term limits, but in reality will weaken them. They say that the current term limit law moves politicians out of office, preventing political bosses from accumulating too much power. And they say that Proposition 28 is payback from a wealthy developer for special favors from the legislature.
Sounds like that one will make for great dinner table debates. Moving on, we get to Proposition 29, also on a familiar theme. Proposition 29 proposes to increase the excise tax on cigarettes.
Aren't cigarettes already heavily taxed?
Yes, a lot of the price of a pack of cigarettes is taxed. There's just over $1 of federal excise tax, and that goes mainly to fund the Children's Health Insurance Program, which provides subsidized health insurance for children in low-income families. In addition, there's currently 87 cents of state excise tax per pack. So for a pack of cigarettes costing something over $5, $1.87 is currently already state and federal excise tax. Now, the state taxes, like the federal tax, have gone up several times over the years, and they support a variety of programs. Some just goes into the general budget. Some is the result of more propositions like this one. Proposition 99 from 1988 is responsible for 25 cents of that 87-cent total. Its funds are used for tobacco education, tobacco-related disease research, healthcare services, and environmental protection. Then you've got the Breast Cancer Fund. That takes 2 cents, and it uses it for cancer screening for low-income women and for breast cancer research. Proposition 10 from 1993 gets 50 cents a pack. That supports early childhood development programs. So that brings us up to this year and Proposition 29. So if Proposition 29 passes, state excise tax on cigarettes will go up by another $1 per pack. And there's already a state law that says anytime cigarette taxes are increased, all other tobacco product taxes go up to match. And the tax on the other tobacco products goes into the Proposition 99 basket, if you will. That's the one that supports a lot of different things: research, prevention, healthcare. For right now, let's just talk about the cigarette taxes. So of that new $1 in excise taxes, 60 cents will go to research on diagnosis, prevention, treatment, and cures for cancer and tobacco-related diseases. 15 cents will go to capital equipment and facilities for research on tobacco-related diseases. 20 cents will go to the Department of Public Health and Department of Education for programs to either help people stop smoking or discourage them from ever starting. 3 cents will go to law enforcement toward efforts to reduce cigarette smuggling, tobacco tax evasion, sales to minors, that sort of thing. And that leaves 2 cents left for administration.
Is cigarette smuggling a big problem?
It's not huge, but it tends to get worse whenever the tax goes up. As the tax on cigarettes goes up, people will either smoke less, which is what the backers of the tax are hoping for, and it is what most people tend to do, or they will look for a source of tax-free cigarettes. In any case, the forecast is for this proposed increase to decrease the number of packs sold. So accordingly, some of the money raised by the new tax is allocated to replacing money that the Proposition 99 and Proposition 10 funds lose as a result of 29's passage. The Legislative Analyst's Office bases its revenue estimates on its best guesses about smoking reduction, cigarette smuggling, whatever other factors they can come up with, to come up with a realistic estimate of projected revenue. None of us has a crystal ball, but the legislative analyst does tend to be very good.
So what kind of numbers are we talking about, and who administers the money?
Well, the Legislative Analyst's Office estimates the state will take in about $810 million annually in new revenue as a result of Proposition 29's passage. About $75 million of that will go to make up for the losses in other funds. as a result of fewer packs being sold. So that leaves about $735 million to go to the goals of Proposition 29. Now, since tobacco use is steadily declining, and may decline even faster with the price increase, we have to see this as a shrinking revenue stream. It's going to go down over the years. Those funds aren't really in the state budget. They can't be administered by the legislature at all, and they can't be lent to other state funds. They are administered by a 9-person committee. 4 of those committee members are appointed by the governor, and 3 of them are directors of designated cancer centers within California. 2 members are appointed by the director of the Department of Public Health. 1 of them has to have been treated for a tobacco-related illness. And the remaining 3 members of the committee are chancellors of University of California campuses that are members of the Institute for Quantitative Biosciences Research, which at the moment would make that the chancellors of Santa Cruz, Berkeley, and San Francisco, because those are the only UCC campuses that are members. So you have this committee, and it then draws up financial plans. It creates a procedure, all the procedures for awarding grants for research, hire staff as necessary, and set intellectual property policies for the funded research. The committee also needs to issue an annual report to the public on what the main money's being spent on and what the research looks like. Now, because this proposition can affect retail sales, it affects things like sales taxes, right? Fewer packs sold, but at a higher price. So it's estimated that state and local sales tax revenue is going to go up a little bit, $10 or $20 million or so, if Proposition 29 passes, taking all those variables into account. That's a really rough estimate. Other financial effects are even harder to pin down, because if fewer people are smoking, healthcare costs from tobacco-related illness are going to go down. Great. That affects the state, not only as a public health matter, but because it's the state that provides health care for the poor and uninsured, and health insurance for its own retired employees. On the other hand, those same people might now live long enough to get sick from something else. So the effect on total health care costs is really a complete unknown. So who likes this proposition, and what do they have to say?
The arguments in favor are signed by the American Cancer Society of California, the American Lung Association of California, and the American Heart Association, Western State affiliates. They say that taxing tobacco saves lives by discouraging teens from starting to smoke and encouraging smokers to quit. They say that the proposition generates hundreds of millions of dollars towards cancer research, and that money is paid only by smokers and can't be touched by politicians.
And who's against it? And what are they saying?
On the con side, we have the California Taxpayers Association, the Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, and a former president of the Golden State Medical Association. They say this proposition raises taxes without cleaning up the mess in Sacramento and allows the money to be spent outside California. They say it forms yet another bureaucracy with insufficient accountability, and they say it provides no new funding for cancer treatment.
Well, if that's all the propositions, is there anything else we want to make sure people know about?
We'd like you to know that the League of Women Voters has speakers like us available before every statewide election. We make presentations on ballot measures throughout the community, at libraries, churches of all denominations, senior communities and groups, mobile home parks, neighborhood associations, corporations, schools, civic groups, and other organizations. If you would like to schedule a presentation for your group, go to the League of Women Voters of California website at ca.lwv.org, that's ca.lwv.org, and click on Find a Local League on the left-hand side. Your local League of Women Voters will be happy to arrange a speaker for your group. We will be continuing to make presentations up to Election Day, June 5th.
I'd also like to remind viewers about the League of Women Voters nonpartisan election information website. You can learn about everything on your ballot by going to www.smartvoter.org and just typing in your address. It'll even find your polling place for you. Other good places to look for election materials: the Easy Voter Guide, It's found in libraries and community centers and at www.easyvoter.org. The Easy Voter Guide is printed in 5 languages, and all of them are available for download. If you really want to dig into the propositions, look on Smart Voter for links to more information, or go straight to the Secretary of State's website at www.sos.ca.gov. That has all kinds of useful information, including the records of who is giving how much money to which candidates and which propositions. And sometimes the supporters and opponents of record are not the people pouring a ton of money into a campaign. So that portion of the site, which is called Cal Access, can make for very enlightening reading. The League of Women Voters Education Fund site at cavotes.org, no WW, just cavotes.org, has a host of useful links about registration, voting, and ballot measures. And finally, as we mentioned before, your local Registrar of Voters website has everything you ever wanted to know about local measures and voting in your area. Useful sites for our local audience include the website for our local League of Women Voters, www.cs.ca.lwvnet.org. That is www.cs as in Cupertino-Sunnyvale.ca as in California, .lwvnet as in League of Women Voters Network.org. And of course, as mentioned earlier, the Registrar of Voters is www.sccvote.org. Think of that as Santa Clara County Vote.org. But whatever you decide about these issues and about researching them, please look at your voting choices and spend a little time understanding them, and then vote your principles. Because we voters are the ones who create the society we live in, and it's a job worth doing well. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to The Better Part for making this program possible.